Stoicism is it's an ancient philosophy. It dates to like the 3rd century BC. But when people hear ancient philosophy, they think, obviously very impractical, very antiquated. It's when we think philosophy, we think like what we didn't like about college, right? But Stoicism is a practical philosophy. So it's how to live, and it's a philosophy that it's very Roman in the sense that it stresses duty, honor, self-control, sacrifice. It's to me it's this sort of operating system for living that instead of being sort of divinely inspired or based, it's very much rooted in the practical experiences of really wise people who not only lived a long time ago, but this sort of tradition, right? So, probably the most famous practitioner, student of Stoicism is Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome. And then on the other hand, who he gets Stoicism from, who his favorite Stoic is a man named Epictetus, who was a former slave. So it's this fascinating tension in the philosophy, in the sort of ethos of it, between like extreme success and extreme adversity, and the sort of self-reliance needed for both. And so I know it's sort of a long-winded definition of it, but that's what it is. It's a way to live, and it's sort of a way of thinking and acting and going about your life that prepares you for the things that happen that are outside of our control. Marcus Aurelius is not just probably the wealthiest man in Rome, he's literally a god, right? He's his unlimited power. And on the other hand, you have Epictetus, who's a slave, who's actually at one point banished from Rome. All the philosophers were banished from Rome by one of Marcus's predecessors. So they're both studying the same philosophy. And so what do they have in common? Well, they're both trying to make sense of the world, our human flaws, our temptations, our desires, our impulses, the stresses that we experience. And so on the one hand, most of Marcus's stresses are going to be of the sort of first world kind, right? Okay, I can do whatever I want. What should I do? I have unlimited wealth. What should I spend it on? I have all these responsibilities and they're weighing on me. And then someone like Epictetus would be dealing with a deprivation of his personal freedom. He actually has a physical sort of limp from his time as a slave. So there's pain there, there's powerlessness there. And so at the root, they're both just trying to deal with life, right? Life where shit happens and shit's out of our control. And then how do they respond to it? One of the sort of famous stories about Marcus Aurelius is he inherits a Roman Empire that is sort of heavily in debt, sort of very overextended. It's suffered a number of wars and costly difficulties. And so he begins to sell off the palace furnishings. He says, I don't need these. Why would I ask the Roman people to pay? Why would I levy heavier taxes on them when we could just sell, some of the crown jewels, so to speak? And so, again, this isn't philosophy in the sort of abstract, but philosophy in the real world. I'm the executive head of this state, and it has a financial problem. I could blame other people. I could make this somebody else's problem. I could be upset about it, or I could solve it. And he sets out to solve it. What's sort of deeply unstoic about the middle class, or most people alive on this planet today, is that they tend to live outside their means. So Stoicism is about this sort of self-reliance, this self-control, and say something like buying things you can't afford on a credit card, or constantly aspiring to more and more possessions, or more and more lavish lifestyle. This is, first off, the Stoics would say it's delusional, in that you think that having more is going to make you happier. And very rarely is this the case. But two, it's also making yourself very vulnerable and weak. So the Stoics are talking about how fortune, not physical fortune, but fortune as in fate, can be very fickle, and that we experience reversals. And so if you're out there sort of constantly overextending yourself, spending more than you have, not creating a sort of a safety net for yourself, not having something to fall back on, sort of constantly needing more and more, what you really are is fragile. And I think Stoicism is about sort of reducing fragility. It's about making yourself as independent to those swings of fortune or fate as possible.